consists of kind of like 2 points to that question, 2 reference points. Reference point number 1 is who the question is being asked of, which is you. What are you doing? Second reference point here, in this place or wherever the place happened to be where you were. It hasn't happened to me too many times where I've had to be asked that question, but it has happened on a few occasions. I remember on one occasion, and believe it or not very long ago, during the heavy snow a number of years ago, there was heavy snow a number of years ago, and a few of us, we decided that we would make sleds and go out and sled down the snow. So we didn't really think, whenever it's snow, then kind of rules don't always apply. So they're a bit more lax, as we kind of thought. So we thought, we were up at Ballysillan Primary School, and we climbed over the fence. There were 3 of us, adults, more than adults, and 1 child. And we kind of threw him over the fence, and then we jumped over the fence. Because Ballysillan School has these great hills for whenever it's snowing and for being able to sled down. And so we climbed over the fence and we're sledding down the hill. It's great. We've made this nice wee track for the sled. Everything's going great until the caretaker shows up with his Rottweiler dog, asking us the question. In fact, not even asking, he's actually shouting and screaming, "What are you doing here?" Because we knew we should not be here. We have trespassed. Dogs barking, we immediately grab our sleds. They go over the fence. We jump over the fence. We're about to run away, and then we realize we've left my nephew because he can't get over the fence. So we got to get him over the fence before the Rottweiler gets to him. Have you ever been in that place where you're kind of asked that question, what are you doing here? It's 2 reference points, you. What are you doing here in a place like this? In other words, you shouldn't really be here. You shouldn't be here. This is not the place for you. What are you doing here? Maybe you've asked yourself that question. You've been in a position, you've been in a place, and you've been asking yourself the question, what am I doing here? And all the men are thinking about that time when they were standing in front of the altar waiting on, not me. Not me. Some of you men, I'll pray for you. What am I doing here? I was only joking whenever I asked, and she said yes, but what am I doing here? Have you ever asked that question? What am I doing here? Or someone's asked of you, what are you doing here? Elijah was asked that question by God. What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? It was asked of him in a cave. Elijah had this amazing journey of faith, amazing walk with God that I don't think compares to a lot of people, maybe the likes of Moses and Abraham, but Elijah was God's prophet for the nation of Israel. And he goes through this incredible journey of God calling him and of God using him. He goes up to the king of Israel, a guy by the name of Ahab, and he tells Ahab, "King, it's not going to rain until I say." And Ahab, I can imagine asking the question, what are you doing here? Could you imagine kind of going up to Buckingham Palace and saying to Her Majesty the Queen, "It's not going to rain anymore in the United Kingdom because because this nation has come so far away from God that God is going to withhold the rain." I know in the UK and over here in Ireland, we'd be like, that's okay. We'd be okay with that, a bit less rain. But in Israel, it meant drought. They would be praying for rain. They would be needing rain because rain didn't come that often. So for Elijah to go to Ahab and to say, "Ahab, it's not going to rain anymore until I say so," meant that there's going to be famine in the land. This went on for years. And in that period of time, Elijah leaves Ahab. He goes to this brook where he is being able to get water by the brook, but ravens come and ravens feed him food. God is looking after him. Supernatural provision in the midst of a drought and in the midst of a famine. God is looking after Elijah. Ravens are coming and bringing him food. It's not what ravens do. Ravens scavengers and trying to take what they can get, but they're bringing him food. And then he leaves there and he goes off to this. He finds himself at the home of a widow, and he's asking the widow for food. And the widow's like, well, I've only got just this tiny little bit of oil, and all I'm really going to do is what I have left. I'm going to make a loaf of bread for me and for my son, and then we're going to die. What tragic circumstances. And in the midst of that, Elijah asks her for what she has left. And the widow obliges. The widow bakes the loaf, creates the bread, and gives it to Elijah. But as a result of that, there's supernatural provision for the woman, for the widow. But God is still supernaturally providing for Elijah. There's this moment in time where Ahab rides off on horses, and Elijah, it says, tucks his cloak up round his waist, and he begins to run, and he runs ahead of Ahab. Supernatural strength. And all this is going on in the life of Elijah. And then comes his kind of greatest victory at a place called Mount Carmel, because Elijah is God's voice for the nation. Elijah is God's prophet for the nation of Israel. And there are all these false prophets that are speaking just to kind of keep Ahab happy and to keep the people happy, but leading them away from the one true God. And so there's a showdown takes place in a place called Mount Carmel. And there's about 450 false prophets of Baal that are gathered. And just Elijah, one against the many. And Elijah's basically saying to him, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a sacrifice, and you're going to sacrifice to your God, and I'm going to sacrifice to my God. And whichever God answers by fire, that will be the one true God, and the other will be put to death. And so what happens is the false prophets, they begin to bring their sacrifice together, and they begin to call fire down from their God. I don't know if Elijah was at any stage on Mount Carmel or through that journey at the brook with the ravens feeding him, or at the widow's house, or maybe on Mount Carmel facing 450 false prophets and the king himself, and then asking himself the question, what am I doing here? But yet God had him in all these places. God was moving in his life. And so the 450 prophets, they began to pray to the false God, to a God that didn't exist. And guess what? There's no answer. There's no answer from heaven. There's no fire that comes from heaven. And Elijah begins to mock the false prophets and begins to make fun of them. Nothing happens. Nothing comes from heaven. So Elijah, it's his turn. And Elijah steps up and Elijah prays to God. And in fact, what happens is Elijah takes his sacrifice, and he has these guys come and pour buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of water onto the wood and onto the sacrifice, making it pretty much impossible to light a fire because the wood is saturated. And Elijah goes and he prays, and God answers by fire and consumes the sacrifice, proving that Yahweh is the one true God, and that all of these men are false prophets. And so all the people take hold of them and they kill every single one of the false prophets. His greatest moment of victory, his highest peak, his greatest success story. All eyes are now on Elijah. You are the man of God. And yet the very next thing to happen to Elijah is that Elijah runs in fear for his life. You would think that of all the moments to actually be standing on a mountaintop and to be proclaimed and declared as something special in the kingdom of God, or as God's man of power for the hour, then this was it. Right on. Your success, Elijah. People are looking to you. You're the leader. You're the voice of God in this nation. People are looking to you. You've just had this amazing victory. Let's go to the next victory. But no, because Ahab's wife Jezebel, she begins to make a statement and a proclamation that if by this day tomorrow I don't make your life like those of those prophets, then may that happen to me, may I die. In other words, if I don't have you dead by tomorrow, then may I die. And I don't know why. I don't know if anybody has ever come up with the answer of why, but everything that Elijah has done, the people that he has stood before, the things that he has seen happen, how God has moved supernaturally in his life as a result of one threat after all of these things from Queen Jezebel. That's the thing that takes him into a cave. That's the thing that causes him to run for his life. And he's in this cave. God asks him the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? What are you, Elijah, the man that I have called? What are you doing here in this cave? You're not supposed to be here, Elijah. This is not what I have called you to, Elijah. This is not where I have called you to. You were not created for this. This is not the purpose for your life, Elijah. There's actually something greater for you, Elijah. I have created you for something different. I've created you for something more. I have not created you to hide in a cave, Elijah. What are you doing here, Elijah? Not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? In other words, it was a call. Come out of the cave, Elijah. Come out of the cage. Yes, the cave. Yes, I know things have been tough. I know you've been struggling. I know that you want to rest. I know that you want comfort, but I haven't called you to a life of comfort. I haven't called you to a life of relaxation. I haven't called you to hide and just to sit back and relax in a cave where it's easy. I've actually placed destiny inside of you, Elijah. I have placed a plan and a purpose inside of you, Elijah, and it's not in the cave. Yeah, I know it's easier there. I know that, Elijah. I know it's easier just to sit back and relax in the cave, Elijah. I know that there's comfort in there. I know that you've got everything the way that you want it to be. I know it's perfect. This is the scenario that you have created, Elijah. It's easy and it's comfortable and it's nice, but it's not what I have placed inside of you, Elijah. Something greater for you. What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? I love the story of Peter, Matthew chapter 14. Just after the feeding of the 5,000 and the disciples are sent on ahead of Jesus, he sends them on ahead across the lake. And it's during this time that Jesus comes walking to them in the middle of the night and they begin to freak out. And Jesus has to say to them, no, it's not a ghost. They're thinking it's a ghost. And Jesus is like, no, I'm not a ghost. It's me. It's Jesus. Yeah, I'm just with you there a few hours ago. And Peter makes this statement, this request. Okay, Jesus, if it's you, then call me out to where you are. How stupid a request can you make? No, seriously. Because how's he going to get there? Because there's only one way. I mean, what's going through this man's head? I can imagine the other disciples in the boat going, what? Because they all know he's got this reputation for putting his foot in his mouth and for speaking up whenever he hasn't been asked to say anything. Peter's the guy that cuts off the ear of the Roman soldiers' side of his head. And, he's like, yeah, Jesus, they'll all desert you, but I never will, But sometimes, and so sometimes what we do is we take the life of Peter and we're like, well, kind of like, you know what, the guy was an idiot. I mean, the amount of stuff that he got wrong was ridiculous. the amount of things that he said and speaking out of turn. And sometimes I think, but we got to give credit where credit's due. Because Peter walked on water. Peter got out of the boat and he walked on water. See, the disciples had this thing of, you know what, it's comfortable back here. This is where we're supposed to be, in a boat. We're fishermen. We're used to this here. Some of them are fishermen, but this is where the comfort is, sitting in a boat. Who in their right mind is thinking that they can actually walk on water with Jesus? Peter did. I don't know if there's something in the psyche of Peter, in his mind, that, you know, whenever you become a disciple of a rabbi, then you are to emulate. We talked about this and Follow Me. You are to emulate everything that your rabbi does. You become like your rabbi. And so I think that there was something in Peter's mind that caused him to think, if my rabbi is walking on water, then I can walk on water. Any one of them could have got out of the boat. I believe any one of them could have walked on water in that moment of time. But Peter's the one that makes the request, Jesus, if it's you, call me out. Jesus calls him out, and Peter walks on water because he'd seen his rabbi doing it. He'd seen the Messiah doing it. He'd seen the Son of God walk on water. And so Peter knew, you know what, if you're calling me to follow you, then I can do what you do. And if you can walk on water, then I can walk on water. And Peter was called out in that moment in time, was called out of the boat and called to walk on the waves. We know the story, how that Peter begins to look at the waves and takes his eyes off of Jesus. And as a result of that, he begins to sink. His faith begins to wane, and he begins to sink into the water. But my goodness, Peter walked on water. I don't know if maybe at some point, as he's standing on those waves, as he's standing on that water, he's asking himself the question, what am I doing here? What am I, Peter, doing here on this water? What am I doing here? You ever ask yourself that question? You've been in that place where you've been asking, what am I doing here? Maybe you're here today and you're asking the same question. What am I doing in church? What am I doing here? Elijah was asked the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? Peter was probably, and that's where the doubts began to come. What am I doing here on these waves? I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be walking on these waves. These waves are now too big for me. And the doubt and the fear begins to come in. When I was away, I had an amazing time away. You meet some incredible, incredible people. Probably more so in Alaska than anywhere else. Alaska is like just a whole another world by itself. The people that I stay with, good friends of mine, their 9-year-old comes out with his sniper rifle. He's like, hey, Pastor Johnny, check out my sniper rifle. I'm like, whoa, what am I doing here? You're 9? It's been tailor-made for him, because that's the way they grew up, hunting and fishing, you know. So kids from no age, he's got like they've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and Gabriel and Eli, and they come up to me the first night that I'm there, and they're showing me these knives that they have made themselves. They've been to one of these guys who actually like hammers metal and makes them into things. And so he brought them in, and they made these knives, these big metal knives, and they're bringing them in. Oh, check this out. You know, one's got this curve on it. The other one's just straight up dagger. And they're like, hey, Pastor Johnny, you made these knives. Aren't these awesome? And I'm like, my goodness, my 10-year-old isn't even allowed to butter his toast yet. These guys are making their own knives. You know, I'd be sleeping with both my eyes open when I'm in that house. But the reason that we go, one of the main reasons that I went over was in Alaska, they have this missions conference. And they bring together all these people who are involved in ministries from around the world. And my goodness, I meet some amazing people. You see, the reason for sharing what I'm about to share as I close in 10 minutes. Yeah, some of you know that's a joke. A number of months ago, we brought together the leaders, or some of the ministry leaders and people involved in ministry in the church. And we basically just asked the question, why are we here? Why are we involved in ministry? And we give a few reasons as to why, and I'm going to share those reasons in just a second, because as a result of that time together on that Saturday morning, I think it was James Scott said that we need to be sharing this with the church. And so what we're going to do is we're going to share some of that with you guys this morning as we come to a close. But we're also going to be then renewing our vision. I'm going to come to that in just a second at the start of 2018. Isn't it crazy we're in 2018 already? Oh my goodness. Some of you brought up in church in the 80s thought that the world would have ended by now. Yeah. Jesus is supposed to have returned by now, not supposed to be here. And so what we kind of want to do is, what I want to do this morning is to just share a few things with you, to ask you the question, what are you doing here? And is there a moment where God is calling you out of a cave, out of a boat? Some of the people that I met in Alaska, let me just break down just a few stories. Guy by the name of Richard Galloway. Richard is probably in his 70s by now. Richard was a multi-millionaire. He owned like about 3-4 banks, because he kind of thought, well, what's the point of me giving all my money to this bank whenever I can just start my own bank and then just keep my money? So he built all these banks in partnership with these other guys. And in like the 60s and 70s and that there, he had, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 homes, all with like 15 bathrooms in each home. He had 3 jets, his own personal jets. He had 3 of them. Houses all over the place, boats, cars that you could, more cars than what I have, got pairs of socks. It was just ridiculous, the amount of money that this guy had. But he says how that every day he was drinking a full bottle of bourbon or tequila or some kind of alcohol to bury the pain that he was carrying, to bury the unhappiness that he was carrying in his life. You see, you can have everything you could ever dream of in the world and still have nothing. And this guy needed Jesus, but he didn't realize it. But he ends up getting saved. He becomes a born-again Christian, and things begin to change in his life. And he kind of leaves the business world, and he goes down to Jamaica, I think it was, and he builds a church in Jamaica. He starts a church in Jamaica. He begins to study the Bible in Jamaica, and he's building a church there, and he's involved in so many things in Jamaica. And over the course of time, he basically gives everything away to charity, to churches, to ministries. He gives everything away. He ends up moving to New York, which is, I think, where he's originally from New Jersey. And he begins to feed the homeless in New York. The homeless problem in New York is ridiculous. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the streets of New York that are homeless. And he feeds them. He's got this amazing ministry now that goes out on a weekly basis. Volunteers, hundreds of volunteers that go out and that feed the homeless on New York City, on the streets of New York City. But at one point, he found him and his wife and his family in this apartment with nothing, with no heat, with no electricity, having absolutely nothing. This multimillionaire that ended up with nothing, but yet still had everything because he still had God. An amazing, incredible man who could have lived that comfortable life, who had all the money, who could have still been saved, still been a Christian, attended church, kept all the wealth, and attended church and lived a life of comfort. But God was calling him out of a cave. God was calling him out of a boat, calling him to walk on water, calling him to live a life that God had planned and destined for him. What an amazing journey he's living. I love Bill Pigaran. Bill's been here on a few occasions. He might be back again this year before the end of the year. We're trying to work on that there. But Bill is a Native American Indian, and he's been here with Jonathan Miracle and Broken Walls, and we've had some amazing times with this guy. And Bill just travels around the villages of Alaska with the natives, preaching the gospel. He's got this dream and his vision for AK one day, Alaska one day, where he wants to do this huge, massive event and bring all the villagers together and do this amazing event where they're preaching the gospel. Because in the villages of Alaska, what they go through is very similar to here. How that here, with the suicide and with the mental health and the depression and the alcohol and things like that, they're experiencing the same things taking place in the villages. And so Bill just goes to all these remote villages throughout Alaska, and he's preaching, and then he goes around the world as well. He has this family that have connected with him, also from the church that we visit in Alaska, called the Angayaks. It's a family of about 6 or so. And DJ, the father, is Native American himself. And what they're doing next year, they're leaving everything behind. And for 3 months, they're going to sail. They're going to sail down the Yukon River, down through Alaska. And they're going to stop off at every village that they come across, every remote village. And they're going to preach and build churches and see people saved. They're going to pray for people. Villages that have probably never heard the gospel. Villages that are in trouble. Villages that are messed up, and they're going to be a shining light in all of those villages. You're talking kids, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, traveling with their parents, sailing down this river. And so the missions conference bought them this huge, big, like, raft thing for them to be able to sail down. Incredible. Kids are in tears. They're like, oh, I can't believe it. It's incredible. Other teams that they go to, likes of Peru and the jungles in South America and in Africa and Asia, and they literally build churches. They go in, they preach, they see people saved, and then they build these wooden structures that become churches for the people. They're actually building one a day, and they're building hundreds, if not thousands, right across South America and Asia and Africa. And it shows you them kind of in fast speed motion, putting all these things together. All these people have left a life of comfort, have left their cave, have been asked the question, what are you doing here? And they've said, you know what, I shouldn't be here. I need to get out. I need to get out of the boat. I need to get out of the cave. I need to go and do something. Last family, I'll share this here, and then I'm going to come to a close with some things I want to share with you. Amazing family, the Eubanks. Hopefully I don't get emotional with this. Try and keep it together, Johnny. Unbelievable. I mean, there's just so much. I could keep you here for hours just talking about the people that you meet and the ministries that they're involved with. Dave Eubank is a guy who was in the U.S. military. He's now retired from the military. And he's seen what was going on in a place called Burma. How that thousands and thousands of people were being murdered in villages by their own government. Being slaughtered, being put to death, being set on fire. Just crazy what he saw was happening in Burma. And he decides, he's praying to God, God, I feel like I want to do something, I need to do something. What can I do? And so he ends up going to Burma, but he brings his family with him. And they go to Burma. And he begins to open up these small villages for people for safety and things like that there. And so he's going into these villages and he's praying with people. You cannot have a conversation with Dave Eubanks without him praying for something. You could be with him 30 seconds, and in that 30 seconds, he'll pray for something. He's an incredible man of God, and he's got an incredible family. And he left what could have been a life of comfort. He's retired from the army. I'm set up for life. I can put my kids through college. They can live the American dream. And he's living in places like Burma and in Thailand, and he's visiting these villages that have been torn apart by war. And he's bringing healing. He's left his cave. He's left his boat. And he's walking on water. He goes to a place called Mosul in Iraq. Him and his family. And they go behind ISIS lines. He does. His family are about a mile away. His daughter, 15 years of age, drives an army ambulance for the injured. And she picks them up, gets them onto the ambulance at 15 years of age. And the reason that she drives is because it's a stick shift. And she's the only one that knows how to drive a stick shift. And she's driving through the streets of Mosul, bringing injured people, injured civilians to the hospital. His family. There's this one video, and it became very famous on YouTube and in America and the Washington Post and places like that there, where there's this little girl, about 4 or 5 years of age, and she's hiding under the body of her mother. She's been there for approximately 1 to 2 days, hiding while ISIS fire down upon her. The street is littered with bodies. And this 5-year-old little girl is hiding under the body of her mother. We watched this video. You get it on YouTube. Free Burma Rangers. You'll be able to watch it and see their story. And Dave's got two guys that have got him undercover, and they come out from behind this tank and they begin to fire at the ISIS lines. And he runs out across the field, across the street, lifts the little girl, runs back, gets shot in the arm in the process, but brings her back to safety and is able to look after this little girl, leaving this place of comfort, bringing up his family in these places. And I was just like, oh my goodness, what's he doing there? And you kind of look at that and you look at their family. Kids, 3 daughters, 1 son. Son's the youngest, Peter, he's about 13 years of age. And he could have been bringing them up in America in a safe environment, but he chose to leave a cave because God was doing something in his heart and asking him the question, what are you doing here? I've not called you to a life of comfort and of safety. I've called you to something greater. Let me finish with this very, very quickly because my time is gone. I want to give you 3 very quick reasons as to why we are here. It'll be on the screens. Because the question that we've been asking, we asked in our leadership, we brought our leaders together and the guys involved in ministry is, why are we here? What exactly are we doing? Give me just a few minutes to go through very quickly why we're here. Just to remind ourselves, because sometimes we can forget, because it's so easy just to come into church and just to do the Sunday thing. And God has not called us, He has not called this church to be a Sunday church. And this center runs almost 24/7. So many things going on. Number 1, it's scriptural. We are here because it's scriptural. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, I don't know if you're able to see that there, but in Deuteronomy chapter 10, it's talking about the tribe of Levi, called to kind of carry the presence of God, to minister on behalf of the people. And so for us as the church, we are the tribe of Levi. We are the priests. New Testament, we are a royal priesthood, Peter tells us. A holy nation, a royal priesthood, called to minister on behalf of the people, called to minister on behalf of the community, called to minister on behalf of the city. Next slide. So it's scriptural. Jesus says in Matthew 16, I will build my church. It's scriptural, but what does that church look like? Not just for Sundays. Matthew 28, we're called to go and make disciples. It's scriptural, church, which we all know anyway. Why we're here, it's scriptural. We can refer to the Bible and says, well, the Bible has said this, so that's what we are. Number 2, next one. The little arrow. We gather around vision. We gather around vision. Our vision, we exist to be a God influence to our city and beyond. That's what we're about, to be a God influence in our city and beyond. Now, there's a lot more to it. And we exist to be a place where the glory and the presence of God flows freely through worship, where the Word of God transforms lives, enabling us to be a God influence to our city and beyond, that all will be saved and come to full maturity of faith in Jesus Christ. That's our vision. It's on that wall out the back there. I would love it if we had that deep in our hearts. This is what we're called to. There's no mention of a place of safety and comfort. But that's what we're called to be a God influence. And we're going to renew our vision in January of 2018. We're going to look at what is it that we're here for? Why do we exist? What are we doing? And how are we going to be a God influence in our city and beyond? The last one, number 3. Give me 5 minutes because we need to go through this. We're here for the community. We do not exist for whatever is within these 4 walls. That's not why we're here. We're here for what is beyond these 4 walls. We're here for the community. Let me show you why, just very quickly. I just want to give you a few statistics. Suicide in Northern Ireland. We have the UK's highest suicide rate in Northern Ireland. For the 2nd year in a row, this has gone back about a year and a half. This is a BBC report, and it's stating that Northern Ireland has the highest rate of suicide in Northern Ireland throughout the UK, and I think throughout Europe. Next slide. The Irish News reported that since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, more people have taken their own lives through suicide in Northern Ireland than those who were killed in the Troubles. More people have taken their own lives since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 than were killed during the Troubles. Next slide. Deprivation is one of the legacy issues, and we know that those areas that are deprived have high levels of deprivation, have also been the same areas exposed by conflict, and those are the areas where the suicide rates are highest. In other words, what these reports are saying is that whenever it comes to the legacy of the Troubles, is that the places that were involved most in the Troubles, i.e. West Belfast, North Belfast, they're the places where you will have the highest levels of deprivation. They're also the places where you will have the highest rates of suicide. Suicide rates in the most deprived areas of Northern Ireland are 3 times higher than the least deprived areas. In other words, if you're brought up in the Shankill or the Falls community, in Ballysillan community, then you're more likely to die through suicide than anywhere else in Northern Ireland or anywhere else in the UK. I don't think that's good enough, church. I read these statistics, and I don't know about you, but something stirs in my heart, and I look at these and I go, you know what, God, that's not good enough. Next slide. Of the suicide rate of the suicide deaths registered in 2015, 77% were male. 132 aged between 15 and 34. 5 people older than 75. 77% male. In other words, if you're a male in this place, then you're more likely to want to die through suicide than anyone else. The community needs us, church. Let me just finish with this. Don't worry about the statistics. I think we've shared enough. But what the statistics show is that within North and West, particularly West Belfast, where we are, it's got the highest rates of suicide, the highest rates of mental health issues, the highest rates of alcoholism, the highest rates of unemployment, the poorest rates, the poorest levels of education. You're more likely, your life expectancy is reduced by a number of years compared to other parts of Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland. Put up the last slide, please. Let me close with this, church. We are the hope. There is hope for this community. I look at these statistics and I think, my goodness, this is not good enough. There's something not right about this. This place is a mess. But I look at this church and I think, you know what? There's actually hope for Belfast. There's actually hope because we're called to be a God influence. And I believe that we are the hope, church. We are the hope for a community. We are the hope for the city of Belfast. God has put something in this place. He is looking at us and He's asking us the question, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? I have called you to something great. I have called you to be an influence in your city and beyond. There is hope inside of you, New Life City Church. There is hope inside of you. The city of Belfast is depending on you. The city of Belfast may not know that it's depending on you, but the city of Belfast is depending on you. Why? Because we are called as a royal priesthood to minister on behalf of others. We are the hope, church. There's hope for our city. There's hope for our community. There's hope, church. I finish with a smile on my face because I'm involved in an amazing church like New Life City Church, who will not sit back in comfort in a cave, who will not sit back in comfort in a boat, but will say, okay, God, what have we got to do to see these statistics changed and turned around? What have we got to do? We're walking out of our cave. We're getting out of our boat. What have we got to do, God? We're going to be a God influence in our city and beyond.